Good afternoon, all of you. It's wonderful to be given the floor after the minister. Actually, it was his predecessor who turned to me in Oslo, not in my capacity as a retired Bishop of Oslo, but in my capacity as President of Religions for Peace. And the background was that the ministry had found that they could not deliver on their political goals in the rainforest program without the assistance of the religious communities and activists around the world. So they said, we actually need religion. And that was the beginning of a wonderful cooperation that we have developed over a year. Almost exactly a year ago, we launched the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. And you better learn that word, because in this year, it has gained traction around the world. It has mobilized faith communities, indigenous peoples organizations, environment activists, academics, politicians, and diplomats. And we have developed a program jointly with governments and with the UN environment. So it is really, in a way, new on the stage, but it is really only bringing on what has always been there. And what has always been there? The commitment of people of faith to save the creation, which is a gift to us. However we understand God and divinity, we have that deep respect as a dimension of our faith. The spiritual dimension, the ethical, moral dimension, and what the religious communities bring in is a network of networks. We are already there on the ground before any foreign assistance arrives. We know the language, and the language of faith is richer than the language of politics and of diplomacy. We can speak about sin. We can speak about need for conversion. We can speak about a future of hope. And I have experienced through my many years of interfaith action with the political level that this dimension is not only needed, but it is appreciated. It is very much appreciated by people in diplomacy, in politics. Why? Because many of them are themselves people of faith. But if they do not express any particular faith, at least they are concerned about values, about the deepest values that we need to share and to bring into action if we want to see a change. One of my favorite observations was when I was chair of the General Secretary of the Lutheran World Federation for 10 years in Geneva. In a hotel in Geneva, there was in the reception a sign, please leave your values at the front desk. And the distinction between values and valuables is one that religion is capable to bring in. And to challenge an understanding of valuables which is not part of the value system. In a conversation with a diplomat, the lady said to me, I don't like the term values. So I said, what do you speak about? Interest. And my response was, unless you have an understanding of values, interest will be self-interest. So we need that dialogue, that deeper dimension of existential understanding of what life and community of creation is about. And that is what we have done. We have come together for a first of its kind, a meeting of Christians, Muslims, Jewish, Buddhists, Hindu, and Taoist religious leaders. And we were gathered in the Nobel Peace Center in Oslo, which was very meaningful for me because I've served on the Nobel Committee for 17 years. And I have seen how the issue of environment, of climate, has been intertwined with the understanding of peace and human rights. It is not sort of a sectorial interest. It is not a separate interest. It is integrated with the whole understanding of human dignity, which we cannot interpret with also speaking about the dignity of the earth, the dignity of the people who live by the earth, and the dignity of the people who protect the earth. So we emerged with a commitment to form a multi-faith alliance dedicated to protecting rainforests and, importantly, to protect the protectors, the indigenous peoples and forest communities that have historically been the best guardians of rainforests. Today, more than ever before, the ethical dimension of environmental destruction are part of the global debate, and we want that to be strengthened. More and more people recognize that by harming the environment, we are also harming ourselves. And there is that dimension of the human person, the human personality, understanding herself, himself, in relation to the divine and in relation to that which we call creation. And it is this in this section where there is so much energy, so much power, but also so much corruption, we need to inject that sense of honesty and truth. And let me say, this is not, it may be sounding enthusiastic and on the verge of being triumphant, but that is not the case. Religion is very often part of it, part of the problem. I speak of religion for better and worse. If we criticize politicians, diplomats, the business sector, we need to see that we also need to address the shortcomings and the faults of religiously interpreted positions around the world. What we are doing with our initiative is bringing insights together, reflecting on developing and conveying the spiritual, the ethical, and the religious case for saving one of the planet's richest ecosystems, which is an iconic part of the creation and a symbol of life itself. We have a few key objectives, and let me run through them very briefly. I am always aware of sort of the need for the moderator to get us to a conclusion on time. We have a few key objectives. Let me mention them. Build consensus. Build consensus. And this wonderful event here is a part of that consensus building. The message of His Holiness the Pope was a message of building consensus. Make the case. Provide a platform for leaders of religions and science and forest communities and academicians to come together for the spiritual, moral, scientific, and sustainable development case. Facilitate learning, because if I speak as a religious leader to colleagues of religious leaders, I would say we need to learn more about what we have heard today. And it is vice versa. So facilitate learning. Mobilize commitment, mobilize religious and spiritual leaders to make rainforest protection an ethical priority. And then inspire action. Inspire action. Create a global faith-based campaign to end tropical deforestation, calling on all people of faith and good conscience to see rainforest protection as consistent with our beliefs, and to see the halting of deforestation as a moral and ethical responsibility, and to take action to end it. And then influence policy, build new coalitions, and not least, celebrate creation. Celebrate creation. I think that religious faith is also about celebration. We have the language, we have the music, we have the poetry, we have those words of existential interpretation of what life is about. And we have that joy of celebration. So with this initiative, we are working to mobilize a whole new constituency to help protect tropical forests. And in that very, very brief chance I had to exchange a word with His Holiness the Pope this morning, I reminded him of an invitation he has received when he was in Peru from Religion for Peace and others there to support this movement and to be with us in this as we continue to develop this and to celebrate this. Let me conclude with first with a question and then with an affirmation. The searching question is, how do faith leaders interact with politicians? How do faith leaders interact with industry and business? How do faith leaders relate to the scientific knowledge base? And when I say leaders, I'm not speaking about a hierarchy, because every person of faith is a leader in terms of spirituality and ethics. I have a favorite quote from St. Paul. And you have heard what I've said. I'm speaking of all the religions coming together. But that does not mean that we reduce the significance of the spiritual inspiration of our own roots theologically, as we heard yesterday in those statements. St. Paul was one who has given great contribution to our understanding about creation, about salvation in that broader concept. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent and praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard, I hesitate to say for me, because it's St. Paul who speaks, he says, put it into practice. Put it into practice. And he concludes, and the God of peace will be with you. I also read it, and the peace of God will be with us. Thank you.